advisor, Dr. Alka Sharma, Dr. Amit Tripathi, scientist D. Academic perspective will be shared by Dr. Rekha Singhal, professor at Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. And the industry perspective will be provided by Dr. Azul Subin, CEO and co-founder String Bio. We appreciate the diverse participation of our audience today who have joined us from across the country. Please feel free to share your questions and comments in the chat feature. We will address as many questions as possible during the question and answer session. I now invite Dr. Alka Sharma, Senior Advisor DBT, to set the context for today's session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Vaishali. Namaskar and very good morning to all of you. On behalf of Department of Biotechnology and BIRAC, I welcome you all to today's webinar on smart proteins under the Biomanufacturing Initiative of Department of Biotechnology. The world is on the cusp of bio-revolution, which will be next industrial revolution to be driven by biotechnology. India too has an innovative, competitive, and a rapidly growing biotech industry ecosystem. Thus, bio-revolution will immensely contribute to India's growing bioeconomy that has grown 13-fold from $10 billion in 2014 to over $151 billion in 2024. The data is up to 2023 December. India's rapidly growing bioeconomy is expected to reach $300 billion by 2030. The Department of Biotechnology and BIRAC have played a pivotal role in nurturing an ecosystem for boosting India's bioeconomy through its various schemes and programs. Through these efforts, India is now poised to join a new global wave of industrial revolution, focusing on more sustainable manufacturing practices driven by recent advances in biotechnology. Recognizing the national importance of biomanufacturing to drive India's bioeconomy, the Union Cabinet, under the chairmanship of our Honorable Prime Minister, approved BioE3 policy, that is biotechnology for economy, environment, and employment, this year in August for fostering high-performance biomanufacturing in the country. This policy was released by the Honorable Minister of State Independent Charge, Ministry of Science and Technology, respected Dr. Jitendra Singh Ji. This policy aims to build a resilient biomanufacturing ecosystem in the country or developing bio-based products. This policy aligns with the Honorable Prime Minister's clarion call for lifestyle for the environment, that is life, and the Union budget emphasis was also on green growth during 2023-2024 interim budget announcement. The Biofoundry and Biomanufacturing has been announced as a new scheme during the interim Union budget 24-25 financial year. Subsequently, the Union Cabinet has also approved the umbrella scheme of the Department of Biotechnology, that is Biotechnology Research, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development, that is BioRide, in September this year. Biomanufacturing and Biofoundry initiative is a new component under this BioRide scheme. Through extensive national consultation and sectoral expert committee meetings, 6 thematic sectors have been identified under the Biomanufacturing initiative of the department, and they are bio-based chemicals and enzymes, smart proteins and functional foods, precision biotherapeutics, climate resilient agriculture, carbon capture and its utilization, marine and space research. A strategic roadmap has also been formulated to implement these thematic verticals under the Biomanufacturing initiative. Call for inviting proposals under these thematic verticals will be announced soon by the department along with BIRAC. Regulatory conclaves are being organized to develop framework for coordinated regulatory reforms for each of the thematic sectors and subsectors The first DBT BIRAC Joint Regulatory Conclave was organized by the Department for Smart Proteins in April this year. The policy also envisages setting up a bio-enablers such as bioartificial intelligence hubs, biofoundries, and biomanufacturing hubs to support innovation and scale up across the thematic verticals. The Bio AI Hub will focus on powering data-driven research across the thematic verticals, while biofoundries will be set up for early scaling up of proof of concepts, and biomanufacturing hubs will be established as shared pilot scale and pre-commercial scale facilities to support scale up of bio-based products in the identified thematic sectors. I am pleased to share that under the first DBT BIRAC joint call for proposal on Molankur bioenablers, biofoundries, and biomanufacturing hubs, a large number of proposals have been received so far from across the countries, and these are under currently evaluation by the committees. India's first biomanufacturing institute, the National Agri Food and Biomanufacturing Institute in Mohali, was inaugurated and dedicated to the nation in October this year by the Honorable Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh Ji. A memorandum of understanding has also been signed between Department of Biotechnology and ISRO, Department of Space, for cooperation in space, biotechnology, and biomanufacturing in this year in October. The department is in discussion with the Ministry of Earth Sciences to formulate an MOU for setting up of advanced centers on marine resources in the country. Outreach activities for Bio3 policy are being carried out extensively through press meets, social media platforms, editorials, webinars, and school campaigns to highlight its significance. To broadcast the activities and the Biofoundry and Biomanufacturing Initiative, the webinar series has been initiated by the department, and also a dedicated website has also been launched. So the topic of today's webinar is smart proteins, which is one of the thematic areas under biomanufacturing. The series features and discussion by the department and also along with the BIRAC officials and scientists on thematic sectors, emphasizing their potential impact on India's bioeconomy. It provides a valuable platform for researchers, startups, SMEs, and industry representatives. So today we are having the webinar that is third in series and focusing on smart proteins. As I mentioned, this is a transformative vertical under the Bio3 policy, highlighting the latest advancements and their critical role in shaping the future of sustainable biomanufacturing in India. As a vital component of this policy, smart proteins hold immense potential to sustainably transform food systems, addressing nutritional and environmental challenges while advancing India's bioeconomy. Once again, I warmly welcome each one of you in today's seminar and hope you will find this discussion insightful and inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for providing an excellent overview of the vision and objectives of this initiative. Our next speaker is Dr. Amit Tripathi, Scientist D, DBT, who will give an overview of the subsector biomanufacturing of smart proteins. Over to you, Dr. Tripathi.
The slides are visible?
Yes.
Yes,
So,
you can.
first thing first, smart proteins can be defined as innovative, sustainable, and alternative protein sources that are designed to address global challenges in nutritional security, meaning thereby that the dietary intake of protein is not up to what the standards prescribe, environmental sustainability, and health. These smart proteins are developed using cutting-edge technologies like precision fermentation, cell culture methods, and plant-based innovations. They can be classified into three types based on their source. There are plant-based smart proteins, fermentation-derived smart proteins, and cell culture-derived smart proteins, or colloquially known as cultivated meat. Now, the question is why smart proteins are required. So smart proteins offer numerous benefits, including that of sustainability, health, ethics, and economy. In terms of sustainability, they have a lower carbon footprint, and their cultivation leads to saving of water and land resources. For example, a study carried out in the EU has suggested that smart proteins lower emissions by about 40% and reduce water use by about 30%. In terms of health benefits, they address the problem of protein deficiency, and they can provide a complete protein with the essential amino acid profile, all the essential amino acid profile, along with the other essential nutrients. Because these proteins can be designed, we can incorporate the essential amino acids, as well as the dietary formulation can contain the essential nutrients also. In terms of ethics, they support biodiversity because varied sources can be used to cultivate smart proteins, and they reduce animal harm. In terms of economic benefits, innovation in food technology can open new markets and new job opportunities. So the smart protein biomanufacturing sector faces some of the challenges that need to be overcome in order to facilitate and promote this sector. For example, in plant-based smart proteins, the recovery and yields of protein from source materials is a huge challenge and requires process innovations. The protein profile from a single source extraction protein is a problem, and therefore we can co-extract from 2 or 3 sources. That is a way out of this. Plant-based smart proteins also face some digestibility issues, and the bioavailability of protein in terms of the actual absorption by the body is lower. Some plant proteins also carry anti-nutrients, allergen, and have an off flavor. The texture of the plant-based protein needs to resemble the animal-based proteins so as to mimic their texture. The other class is cell culture-based or cultivated meat. In this sector, the challenge is development of cell lines which are reliable and reproducible manner. Production of smart proteins can be achieved. The culture media needs to be optimized, including the growth factor. The bioprocess design has to be optimized so that there is no batch-to-batch variation and the cost economics are there. And scaffold needs to be developed so that they can mimic the texture. In terms of the fermentation-derived protein, the strain development and engineering is a challenge. The other challenge is feedstock optimization. And in case of single-cell proteins, there is a high concentration of nucleic acids, mainly RNA, that needs to be tackled. Otherwise, there is a precipitation. And it also leads to unpleasant color and flavors. And there are some toxic secondary metabolites. The cross-cutting challenges are safety and toxicity assessment is required because these are new products, and end product formulation, characterization, and manufacturing at scale has to be optimized, and there needs to be effective communication to build consumer trust. So in all these 3 sectors, the first areas have been delineated. For example, in the fermentation-derived proteins, microbial strain repository development is an area which we need to work on. Bioprocess optimization, wherein we use recombinant microbial system and optimize feedstock and bioreactors. And downstream processes also need to be standardized. The quality control protocols need to be devised for safety and consistency. In case of plant-based proteins, the source needs to be diversified. We cannot have the same sources like lentils, which are also used as diet directly. So we need to diversify the source base like hemp and minor pulses, etc. We need to enhance the technology for protein extraction, extrusion, and infrastructure. And we need to focus on development of plant-based products mimicking traditional animal-based products so as to facilitate adoption of these products by the consumers. In case of cultivated meat, as I discussed, cell line development is a thrust area, and bioreactor and scaffold design is another area which we need to work on, followed by bioprocess integration, wherein we have to combine precision fermentation with cell culture for a scalable production. Now, we often hear about the regulatory challenges in any novel sector. In the smart protein sector, the smart protein products in terms of regulation can be divided into either proprietary foods or non-specified foods. For proprietary foods, the regulation is fairly straightforward. And for non-specified food, it is on a case-to-case basis. Some green shoots are that FSSAI permits enzymes from GM microorganisms as processing aids under the Food Product Standards and Food Additives Regulation 2011 if they are prepared following good manufacturing practices. Recently, FSSAI has approved a non-animal whey protein, which was developed through precision fermentation, and has also approved a mycoprotein derived from Fusarium venenatum under the non-specified food regulations. Now, to facilitate the addressing of some of the regulatory challenges, we had organized, as ma'am mentioned, a smart protein regulatory conclave in April this year, wherein some suggestions were made in all the three sectors. For example, in the plant-based protein, approval and compliance have to be streamlined, the labeling requirements have to be standardized, and we have to ensure supply chain sustainability and quality assurance. So it has to ensure that there is no batch-to-batch variation. In case of the fermentation-derived protein, we have to have clarity in safety and labeling standards. We have to provide some incentives to encourage investment in food-grade commercial fermentation and establish quality standards and promote consumer education. In terms of the cell culture-derived proteins, we have to streamline the guidelines in accordance with the global guidelines. And because it's a new product, we have to focus on consumer education. So now, how to create an impact on the India's smart protein sector? So there is an idea in which DBT can play a key role. DBT can facilitate regulatory streamlining in consultations with the stakeholders, and by facilitating R&D by academic and research institutions, and setting up of infrastructure and scale-up facilities and AI-powered platforms in biomanufacturing and bio-AI hubs, with the facilitation of smart protein startups and food industry, we can create an ecosystem that supports the smart protein sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi, for providing a comprehensive insight into the smart protein subsector. It is now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Rekha Singhal, professor at ICT Mumbai. Dr. Rekha Singhal is a distinguished professor with more than 30 years of experience in teaching and research in the areas of food science and technology, bioprocess technology, and functional foods, often combining innovative approaches to address pressing challenges in these domains. I now request Dr. Singhal to share the academic perspective on biomanufacturing of smart proteins. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the kind words of introduction. And I continue with where Dr. Tripathi has left. And I would like to present some academia perspectives on manufacturing of smart proteins. The flow of my presentation is as follows. Can we broaden our basket for alternate proteins? And I would present some examples. We need some rethinking on our resources through public-private partnerships, some thoughts I would express. And since the products are not just product, but they are also processing technologies are required, we also need to have some thoughts in this aspect. And considerations for charting out regulatory for alternate proteins, part of which has already been expressed, and a few points I may add. And there are some more thoughts for public-private partnerships and conclusions. So let us look at how we can broaden our basket of alternate smart proteins. And here we require inputs from academicians. The first thing is Indian whey protein market. Whey is actually a very important protein source, and it is actually finds favor with the young because of health and fitness associated with whey protein. And whey protein actually facilitates muscle development and general well-being. The market is projected to reach about 125.2 million US dollars, and its CAGR is around 5.08 during the forecast period of 2024 to 2030. So I think this is one market which we can tap, considering that India is amongst the largest producers of milk in the world. Apart from food, proteins also find applications in personal care and cosmetics, and we need to have these proteins. The reasons why we need whey proteins apart from food, of course, we are deviating slightly from food, is because it's a natural ingredient and it has functions like skin smoothing and hair conditioning, and which is attributed to collagen and amino acids found in whey protein. This is a very interesting source of protein, and which is the grass protein. In fact, it is called as green gold. And we can see that there are already products which are commercially, it's clouding my, hello, it is clouding my screen. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it is clouding my screen. It is clouding my screen, sir. It is clouding my screen.
Ma'am, we have shared from our end because your slides were not displayed, so we have shared the screen from our end.
Okay. No, but I
Can you
think
see
it
our
is.
screen?
I'm not able to see the screen.
Just 1 second.
I was
Hello?
presenting. Let me present it. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. They were not visible here, so you can just go to app, ma'am. Go to app at the bottom.
Where is it now?
At the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can
now
you
it's
see it
visible.
now? Okay. Yes, it is visible. So I was mentioning that grass is emerging as a new protein source, and there are many commercial products available in countries like Netherlands. And the process is pretty simple. Actually, it is leafy biomass is extracted, and then there through processing, we can get green protein and white protein. Green protein goes for animals, and white protein is suitable for humans. And the residue that is left behind can go for animal feed. Grass protein is not only a sustainable animal feed, but it has a very good amino acid composition. It has low environmental impact, and it does not really need too much of water. Although the taste is not very appetizing, but yet people have developed protein bars with 10% grass protein and through masking. However, this would need approval from regulatory bodies. Trash protein is another important source, and we can see that conventional ingredients use soybean meal and trash fish, but alternate ingredients can also be developed using food waste, fish waste, and okara. And then you can have proteins for trash fish. Now, why we need to look at seafoods or proteins from seafoods is because India is the second largest producer of fish in the world, and processing levels of marine foods are at 23%. We have a very long coastline, and we also have a good export market, but we are generating more than 2 million metric tons of waste, which can actually be utilized for protein manufacturing. Now, this is an example we can see. Are we ready to utilize our seafood byproducts? And we can see, for example, the shellfish has about 20 to 40% protein, and which could be very easily actually utilized. And there is a lot of efforts which are going on. And I believe that we need efforts from academicians to take it forward. insect proteins. Now, we may think that insect proteins are not very, not very palatable, or, not very, people are not very comfortable. But the fact is that the insect protein market, the global forecast to 2027, it is expected to reach 3.3 billion USD market, and which is growing at a rate of 33.4%. It has very good amino acid composition. It has good amount of proteins, fats, and also calories. As we can see when we compare it to, we see different kinds of insects. And we see that, there is a flow chart. There are processes available for manufacturing of insect proteins. And we also see that these insect proteins can also give us bioactive peptides, and they have plenty of applications in the industry apart from acting as a food source. Now, we may like to think that India insects are not really consumed, or insect proteins may not be acceptable, but we can see so many insects, about 9 insect varieties, which are popular in Nagaland, and they are regularly consumed. And it is not just our northeast region, but if you see the map, you will find that in the southern region and even in the tribal belts of central India, insects are consumed. So this is one more source where there are people who are ready to accept this as a protein source, and we need to work on it. Now, this is something which I thought is very interesting, and this is soline. Now, this is literally a protein out of thin air, and this is actually a golden colored, almost like turmeric protein, and it has a very delicate umami flavor. And what does it require? Only air, microbes, and solar energy. And in fact, the principle here is there are hydrogen oxidizing bacteria. There are many, but the most important one is Xanthomonas, and it utilizes dissolved hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen to form amino acids, vitamins, fats, and carbohydrates. And Singapore, in fact, is on the way to approve the sale of products with soline. This has been named soline, and this is a very sustainable production of a protein, and without any harm to the plants or animals. The manufacturers say, in quoting them, we use electricity to split water from air into hydrogen and oxygen, and thanks to the renewable power, the efficiency from electricity to calories is about 20%. Now, if you look at some technical details, it just needs 10 liters of water per kg of protein, as against, say, 15,500 for beef and 2,500 liters for vegetable protein. This process is claimed to be 20-fold more efficient than photosynthesis, and the company Solar Foods is planning to introduce soline in plant-based meat, bread, pasta, and other food products. In fact, even before it has come into the market, it has already featured in Time magazine's top 100 inventions. And I believe that India, we have blessed with abundant of solar power, and I think we can consider this and include it as one more category. Now, coming to rethinking on our resources, we can have enzymic bioprocessing for the manufacturing of proteins, with less water footprint, and which would be actually environmentally sustainable and economically viable. We can also use appropriate additives to achieve meat texture. We are already having a lot of oil extraction plants, but can we modify them to simultaneously recover both the oil and the protein? And can some entrepreneurs come into it? I believe it is technically feasible, and you can see this as an example. If you look at enzyme-assisted extraction for recovery of plant proteins and oil, it does not even require an organic solvent. And this is an example which is given from almond flour, but actually we can apply it to most of the oilseed proteins, and it is something which is worth considering for scale up. So I won't go too much into details because I'm focusing more on the concepts. Now, this is again in enzymatic processing for the production of for the production of alternate proteins. And we can see non-animal agro-industrial residues through enzymatic assisted extraction. We can get protein concentrate, which can go into the production of cultured meats. And simultaneously, the residue also could be hydrolyzed enzymatically to get protein hydrolysates, which could have applications. Now, a bit about the processing technologies. And I have worked a lot on supercritical carbon dioxide extraction technology. This is one technology which can facilitate simultaneous recovery of both proteins and oils. There are questions on process and product economics, but at the scale, it is actually quite comparable. It is actually quite economical. There is a conservation of energy in this process due to lower time required for extraction. And also, if you look at from the oil perspective, we avoid one step of removal of solvent. Apart from this, there are some other processing techniques which could find some thoughts, which need some thoughts. For instance, the conventional plant proteins are typically extracted by alkali solubilization, followed by isoelectric precipitation. Now, most of the materials which are used are first dried, ground, and then again alkali is added. So can we not use the fresh source of protein? And so this would lead to both energy and water conservation. So we need some thoughts in this area. Now, when I mentioned that it is possible to recover oil and fat, Dr. Tripathi spoke about hemp. And you can see in the first part with the green background that this is an example where supercritical extraction has been used to recover both fat and protein. And such type of work is reported, but we need to apply them. On the other side, we can see that people have even used conventional extraction to recover both the fat and the protein. So this is not something which is impossible, but we need to open our mind and eyes to make it viable. Finally, some thoughts for charting out regulatory for alternate proteins. Already quite a bit of them have been spelled out, but with plant-based proteins, there is also a possibility of heat-resistant pathogenic bacteria which need to be addressed. Single-cell proteins, there are possibilities of formation of unnatural amino acids when we try to remove the RNA. And in addition, they have a thick cell wall which limits their digestibility. There are also possibilities of accumulation of heavy metals and toxic substances when single-cell proteins, particularly microalgae, are grown on effluents. And microbial contamination and viral pathogens is a reality which needs to be tackled. Before I conclude, I would say there are some more issues for cell-based proteins with respect to regulatory. There are concerns of genetically modified organisms. There is uncertainty of sampling immortalized cell lines. There should be freedom from all viruses derived from bovine serum. There are hazards which are associated with the 4 stages of cell-based food production, and there are religious and environmental concerns. There are other thoughts, and finally, to conclude, before I conclude by saying that academia can play a big role to achieve bioprocessing of smart proteins, we need to consider whether seaweed proteins can be an alternate source, yeast biomass versus algal biomass, co-extraction of proteins for 2 or more sources so that we can get a balanced amino acid profile. We need to explore 3-phase partitioning, which is a very good technique, and it can separate the biomass into proteins and fat. We need to also evaluate scale up because, working at a lab scale and commercializing it requires scale up considerations, and we need to evaluate them thoroughly. Since we need to also take care of carbon credits and water footprint, we also have to understand the principles of life cycle analysis. And we need to or reorient our mindset, valorization, the concepts of circular economy, and I believe academia will play a role in this area. With these few thoughts, I thank you for the opportunity to express my thoughts in this area. Thank you so much.
Finally, I would like to invite Dr. Isel Subin, CEO and co-founder of String Bio, a pioneering biotechnology company based in India. With a background in synthetic biology and a passion for sustainability, she has spearheaded innovations in leveraging microbial processes towards high-value bio-based products like protein, feed, and biochemicals. Dr. Isel, please.
Hi, thank you so much for having me for part of the panel. Before I jump in, can you see my slides?
Please go ahead.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. So excellent overview on the alternative protein industry from both Dr. Amit as well as Dr. Rekha. I wanted to take the next 10 minutes to kind of provide an industry perspective in terms of where the industry is today, as well as what are the challenges and opportunities that we have in terms of scaling up smart proteins. So the first, I think we touched upon this quite extensively, is we require smart proteins for better health for people overall. Definitely for better health for the planet, right? The way we grow proteins or the way we consume proteins today, not the most environmentally friendly, and we need some sustainable options. Now, when you talk about scaling up and commercializing smart proteins, the third aspect, of course, to consider is the economic viability of bringing these proteins to market. Both what it takes in terms of unit economics at scale, as well as what it takes in terms of supply chain distribution, taking these products to market itself. Now, from an industry perspective, I think one of the first things that's very, very attractive is the growing demand for protein overall. Dr. Amit touched upon this briefly, and what is very interesting to see is as we all go on to live longer and want to live healthier, globally, there is a growing demand for protein. And when you look at Asia particularly, what is interesting is that most of this demand is very high when you look at countries like China and India, where today the average protein consumption is actually at the lower end, right? So we are all trying to catch up with our Western counterparts in terms of the net protein that we consume per day. Both in terms of nutrition as well as in terms of health span that we're looking at. So this is a very interesting opportunity for industry today. And the second and key aspect that perhaps I wanted to highlight is when you look at the macronutrients that we consume, right? When you talk about carbohydrates, when you talk about fats, and when you talk about proteins, and when you look at the cost of each of these macronutrients in the market today, your carbohydrates are, you're able to access it at below $2 a kg. Your fats below $4 a kg. But today, protein is at the higher end of the value chain, which is why, in our parents' time, you probably had protein, maybe your, for non-vegetarians on the call today, you probably had protein once a week, right? And one of the opportunities that exists for the industry today is, can we bring down this cost of protein so that you also have an opportunity to make it more broadly available across the spectrum? So, if I were to put on my industry hat today, what are the opportunities that we are looking at in terms of the industry, given that there is a growing demand for this? There is an opportunity to perhaps bring these proteins to market at scalable economical price points. I think one thing that's very interesting and what Dr. Rekha also highlighted is what we knew as protein was largely either your chicken, your fish, your egg, or your lentils, your soy, your whey. But today, as we start to look at new interesting sources of protein, along with it, we also have an opportunity to bring new functionalities to the marketplace, right? As we start to extract protein from, let's say, a millet or a mung bean or other sources or fermentation-based protein sources, we have an opportunity to bring functionality to this whole space that didn't exist before. So very interesting opportunity. As I mentioned, there is a huge opportunity to bring down the cost per kg of protein while scaling and making this more globally available. Again, a fantastic opportunity. Dr. Amit touched upon the sustainability of protein itself, right? So the very aspect that we're talking about, smart protein, comes from the fact that protein as we know it today has a very high either land footprint or water footprint or environmental footprint. And now today we have an opportunity to make this more sustainably, right? So some of the sources that Dr. Rekha touched upon are sources where the environmental footprint of these proteins is significantly lower, correct? And then you also have an opportunity to really cater to consumer demand, right? Today, consumers want clean food, they want chemical-free food, they want organic food, they want antibiotic-free food. So you have, as an industry, we have an opportunity to actually cater to this growing demand, right? What is interesting is over the last 10 years, a number of companies and a number of technologies have come up to actually address this growing demand in the marketplace, right? What you have on the screen is a subset of a snapshot of companies in the alternative protein space today that are all looking to address these opportunities that we talked about. Some of these companies are doing it using fermentation-based approaches. Some of these companies are doing it using plant-based approaches. Some of these companies are scaling up using cultured meat-based approaches, right? So clearly a huge opportunity and demand in the marketplace. But over the last 10 years, a number of companies have also jumped in, a number of groups, founding teams, and not just startups, but also your large strategic players have jumped in to address this growing demand, right? So if you look at the snapshot globally, you've got Asia Pacific, you've got about 360 startups, companies in the Asia Pacific zone that has jumped in to address, some of the challenges in the all protein sector. And you have maybe double the number of companies in US, Canada. And even if you look at Africa or Latin America, these are not that far behind, right? So globally, some of these opportunities that we talked about are being addressed. Along with it, fortunately, there's also private capital that is coming in. I want to say both private and public capital, right? That is coming in to say, how do you build the solutions that will help us address some of these issues? I think over the last 10 years, the capital that has come in, whether you talk about fermentation-based solutions or cultivated meat-based solutions or plant-based solutions, has almost doubled, right? So in 2014, globally, we had about 170 million coming in to fund the work in the sector. Today, that's almost gone up to a 1.6 billion, right? That's come in to fund the work in the sector. And this covers work at all stages of the spectrum, right? Early stage innovation work, funding some of the novel extraction technologies that Dr. Rekha had touched upon, funding scale up and biomanufacturing setup, right? To bring these products to market. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of players and capital also invested in the sector. So what has happened? Have we started to see some of these products in the marketplace? I think one of the first products to perhaps hit the market from the plant protein sector was the products from Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, which were all in the plant protein sector. Closer to home, you had companies like Good Dot that have started to put out products in the marketplace. And then more recently, you've had players in the cultured meat space also start to introduce products to market. We've slowly started to see regulatory approval for some of these products globally, with some countries like Singapore and Israel and US perhaps taking leadership roles in terms of moving forward on the regulatory front, right? So the question now is why is this not why is this not mainstream? Why don't we have all proteins everywhere? Because we've been talking about it, there's a lot of capital that's gone in. There are very interesting technologies. There are a lot of startups already in this space. I think this is my personal perspective is if you look at the smart protein sector today, all of these technologies, whether you're looking at it in terms of plant proteins, whether you look at it in terms of fermentation-based solutions, or whether you look at it in terms of cultured meat-based solutions, we're all in the innovator or early adopter phase of the technology curve, right? I would say probably plant protein is the furthest along, where you've had your early innovation, you've had early products come to market. There was a huge upswing in terms of the funding that went into the plant protein sector during COVID time, which has now actually started to taper off. But I think perhaps it is at a point where it would perhaps go from an early adoption stage to slowly start to see an early majority, right? If any of you have gone to a Pizza Hut or a Domino's and you actually look through the menu, even the delicious, right? You actually start to see plant protein options today. So perhaps it is at a point where it's transitioning into that, early majority. When you look at where fermentation-based solutions are, I think this is very, very early in the adoption curve. And this goes to perhaps some of the initiatives that Dr. Alka had highlighted early on. There are multiple reasons why it's still in the early adoption curve, perhaps infrastructure and regulatory being one. And it still needs to scale. I would say further behind is your cultured meat, where it's still perhaps in the early technology space. You do have a couple of entrants who've gone through regulatory approval and brought product to market, but still not at a very large scale yet today. So the question then begs, if you're folks on the call, if you're entrepreneurs, or if you're folks doing research in this space, the question that comes up is what needs to happen for each of these technologies to transition upwards on this adoption curve, so that we can actually solve some of the issues that we're talking about, which is largely how do we make protein available for majority of the people at the right price points, right? So I just wanted to perhaps highlight some of the challenges that we see being entrenched in this industry of what needs to get addressed for each of these technologies to go up the adoption curve, right? I think one of the first, I would say, is perhaps consumer awareness and consumer acceptance in terms of taste, structure of what we're bringing to market. I think while the early products in the market have been very good, I think we still perhaps have research to do in terms of ensuring that there is a very easy transition that happens. Proteins are coming to market in forms, structure, function that is known to people. So there's a wider adoption of this. So I think that's still maybe one area of innovation that needs to happen. A fair amount has happened, but I think we still have one or two breakthroughs that need to happen for a wow effect in the marketplace for some of these products. The second, and this particularly comes to particularly relevant when we talk about fermentation-based solutions, is I think there is a lack of scaling up infrastructure. So you have some very, very interesting solutions in the early lab scale and perhaps early pilot scale. But some of the startups, some of the companies in the scale are clearly struggling to scale up and bring large volumes. When we say large volumes, we're not talking about a kg or your ton, but multiple tons and perhaps getting to millions of tons of protein being able to come to market. And here, one of the biggest bottlenecks here is the infrastructure. And this is something that, I think the Bio E3 policy is directly looking to address. And, India clearly has taken a leadership position in terms of saying, hey, we're going to proactively ensure that, that bottleneck can be relieved. And I think once some of these funds come into the market and you see the infrastructure come in place, I think it will give us a way to address this challenge. The third and I think key challenge for us to be able to transition these technologies up the adoption curve, I think, is to be able to demonstrate profitability for these solutions, right? Because while protein is interesting, while it is a requirement, ultimately we need to show that it can be an economically viable value proposition at scale. We had some very high capital infusion come into the space around 2020, 2021. And I think some of those investors are now looking to see, are looking to see how, which are the companies that are able to demonstrate profitability. And I'm sure once that happens, some of the capital will double down on being able to scale these technologies, right? Because if you see, in 2020, there was almost $2.6 billion that came in to fund some of this work. And that number has come down in 2024. But I think as some of these technologies mature and there's a wider adoption, I do believe that you'll have more capital come in to support this. But that's clearly a challenge in the industry today. And I think fourth and key point, which perhaps we have to address for some of these solutions to become more majority adopted or early majority adopted solution, I think is very clearly the regulatory landscape. I think there is a lot of work that is being done by governments, by the Indian government, to see how the regulatory can keep up with some of the innovation technology that is happening. But that still continues to be happening at a lower pace. And that clearly is an area where we need to do some work so that some of these solutions can come to market faster. So I would say if your folks that are working in this space or looking to get into the space, these are some of the things that have to get addressed for innovation to go even one step further, right, in this space. In the next couple of minutes, I just want to take give you a very high-level view on one of the solutions that we're working at String today, which is a fermented protein-based solution. String clearly is one of the early entrants in the space in India. We have a fermented protein-based solution that we're scaling up. And we've gone through, some of the challenges that I had addressed earlier. But today we are at a point where we've been able to, develop a very high quality fermented protein that is made from a very sustainable source. So if you look at the environmental footprint, water footprint, land footprint of this protein, significantly lower compared to what you can get from an animal source of protein or even plant protein sources. So today we've built this. We've addressed some of the taste, color, texture challenges that the market has thrown at us. And today, essentially, we're scaling this production process and going through regulatory approval to be able to bring this product to market, right? So if you look at this is basically an indigenous solution from India, which has been developed through labs working with collaborators in the Indian ecosystem, and then slowly scaling from lab to a pilot to a commercial, and then working through the regulatory landscape in the Indian ecosystem to be able to bring this to market, right? So essentially going through the journey. The product has not hit the market yet. We are still going through regulatory before we can bring this to market. So I just wanted to perhaps close with saying that, the big attraction for the alternative protein industry is that this is a very interesting solution that can deliver value benefits across the value chain, right? From your large food companies to your food service providers to your final consumer, very, very important cog in this value chain, to actually the environment, right? Whether it is people, planet, profitability, business, I think the alternative protein industry is poised to deliver value But clearly, we still have some key challenges, whether it is capital, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is regulatory, that needs to get addressed. For some of these solutions on the plant side, on the fermented side, on the cultured meat side, to move from that early adoption curve to becoming an everyday product that you see widely in your store shelves, where we're not taking time to talk about it, but it becomes almost like milk or a fruit that you consume every day. I think that is the vision, to see what needs to happen for us to go from that early curve to a mass majority today. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. I'll stop now and happy to address any questions that folks on the call may have.
On the floor for questions from the audience. Let us take the first question.
Thank you, ma'am. First, we'll just take up one question for Alka ma'am. Ma'am, there's a question from Dr. Barua. It's how can DBT facilitate the regulatory compliance of the products in the smart protein sector? Your views on this, please.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very, very important question from, if you really see from this sector. So as I mentioned, and also one of the speakers also mentioned about this. So DBT, as per the roadmap which we have created for the each sector and subsector, the regulatory, addressing regulatory issues is one of the very, very important component. So for this, what we have planned, that we are planning to have regulatory conclaves, and smart protein is the first sector where we organize regulatory conclave with all the stakeholders, including the senior officials from the FSSCI. And the way we are moving forward, we look forward for the more focused discussion meeting addressing the issues and challenges being faced by the industry, and maybe on a case-to-case basis. And similarly, we are planning to have that kind of regulatory conclave for other sectors also. But we started with smart protein, we'll continue with that, and we are going to plan this in a bigger manner with the industry, maybe just to sit with them, understand the gaps and issues, and how to address that. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your response. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Dr. Prachi Agarwal from BIRAC to please facilitate a few questions.
Ma'am, the next question is for Dr. Rekha Singhal, ma'am. And the question is basically, how do Indian dietary preferences and cultural factors influence the adoption of smart proteins? The question is from Dr. Subramanian, and they want to know some strategies to increase the consumer acceptance and adoption of smart proteins.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think if we look at our Indian culture, we have been consuming proteins in the conventional forms. But apart from that, in times of non-availability or unfavorable seasons, people have been trying to produce products, for later consumption, like buddies, mangodis, these have been a part of our culture. Paneer is something which is extremely popular now. And so also there are products like tofu, which are already Indian consumers have adapted to it. The growth of vegan is also very much there. And India has been primarily a vegetarian population. So I believe that, it should be possible if these smart proteins can be incorporated or formulated into food formulations that the consumers are familiar with. So if that is possible, I'm sure it can be done.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to request Dr. Smita to facilitate a few questions now.
So the next question is for Dr. Azil by Dr. Nishant. The question is about costing and scaling up. He's asking, what are the major challenges in scaling up the production of smart proteins for commercial use? And how does the cost of biomanufactured smart proteins compare with traditional protein sources? Dr. Azil, your views on this?
Yeah, so I think has highlighted, right? I would say perhaps the top two challenges scaling up of smart protein today. One is largely the infrastructure. When you talk about, particularly when you talk about, let's say, fermented protein coming to the marketplace, the advantage with fermented protein is that it actually can give us the scale that we require for large adoption. But then that requires capital to be spent in terms of setting up the infrastructure. The challenge with plant proteins is there's seasonality. Some of it, except for soy, perhaps the other sources don't have that kind of scale. So I think the first is infrastructure. Second is, some of the things we talked about, including capital investments required for scaling up, as well as the regulatory, I would say. Your second question on the price. I think the advantage of the type of protein that we're talking about is that these can actually compete with soy protein today or a pea protein today, or even your traditional animal source of protein in terms of cost parity. And I think that is the next level of innovation that needs to happen is now that we have solutions available, the next question becomes how do we scale so that we get unit economics to be able to bring these products to market at cost parity with existing solutions so that you can drive wider adoption. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you, ma'am. I would like to follow up with another question. So you showed a screenshot of all the new and coming companies working in this field. So this is related to that. Mr. Mishra is asking, what are the prospects for exporting Indian-made smart proteins to global markets?
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Fantastic question. I think that's a huge opportunity that is open for Indian companies because I think similar, one of the strengths that we have in the Indian ecosystem is actually that we are very good at biomanufacturing. We've seen that in the pharma sector. We're also very good at food processing, right? The skill to be able to do that actually is quite widely available in the Indian ecosystem. And the cost of manufacturing in India can be quite cost competitive. I think given this, India has a huge opportunity to be able to be a hub for biomanufacturing within India and for being able to export it to global markets. I think they're already starting to see this. Some of the clear early entrants in this space from the US market are already in touch with players in India to be able to scale in India and export it to the US. This is already happening in very small levels, but I think this can become a huge opportunity for the biotech sector in India today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hazel. We'll just take up one more question. Due to time constraint, I would request our participants to please mail us post the event. You will get a feedback form. We'll be happy to answer your questions. So before closing up, we'll just ask Rekha ma'am one question, ma'am, for you. Final question for the webinar today. So this is from Dr. Ashish Wagmare. He's writing, Rekha ma'am, thank you for your interesting presentation covering broadly new technologies and concepts. So can you please put some light on solid productivity and scalability aspects?
Yeah. So thank you, Ashish. Soline actually is very new and it is possible to scale up because we have solar energy available with us. And actually a lot of work, lot of data has not really been revealed, but this is a new concept and it is being explored by Singapore. And they are actually planning to bring it commercially in various forms. So I believe that, a lot of information is not available, but it should be scalable. It should be scalable. And these are actually bacteria. These are bacteria which oxidize hydrogen. So there is a lot of scope in exploring different types of bacteria. Although the one which is being promoted by Soline is Xanthomonas. But there could be many others, and there are many others.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I think with this, we'll put a stop to our question and answer. Rest will encourage our participants to please mail us. And also YouTube link is available for that. I'm really thankful to the people who have been patiently listening us since morning to all the presentations. And ma'am, also a lot of people have thanked Dr. Alka ma'am, Dr. Ezil, Dr. Rekha. Thank you everybody for this. And over to you, Vaishali ma'am, please.
Thank you, BIRAC, for moderating the question and answer session. As we come to the end of this insightful webinar, I would like to extend heartfelt thanks to all our speakers. Your insights have shed a light on immense potential of biomanufacturing of smart proteins in achieving sustainable growth in India. I request all the participants to mark their calendars for our next webinar in this series, which will explore other thematic areas under the Biofoundry and Biomanufacturing initiatives. Details on the webinar will be shared soon on DBT and BIRAC websites and also through social media platforms. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.